It's 2:14 a.m. and you're wide awake. Not because of a noise, not because you had too much coffee, not because of a nightmare. You're staring at the ceiling doing math. Real math. Panicked math. The kind where you're mentally scrolling through every bill due this month and trying to figure out if your paycheck lands before or after the rent withdrawal hits. Your car made a weird sound yesterday. You haven't checked what it was because some part of you doesn't want to know. And somewhere around 2:20, your brain decides this is the perfect time to replay every bad financial decision you've ever made, going all the way back to that one credit card you opened in college that you're honestly still not sure is paid off. If this sounds familiar, I need you to know something right away. This isn't random anxiety. It's not you being dramatic or weak or bad with money. There's an actual, predictable, well-documented reason your brain does this specifically at night, specifically when your bank account is low. And there's a shockingly small dollar amount that can make it stop. Not stop forever, not stop completely, but stop enough that 2 a.m. goes back to being just another hour of sleep, instead of a courtroom where you're being cross-examined by your own anxiety. I spend way too much time thinking about money, the psychology behind it, and why some people seem to sleep just fine with a bank account most of us would panic over, while other people lie awake even when things technically aren't that bad. If you've ever had a 2 a.m. money spiral, or you're currently in the middle of a financial stretch where you're waiting for that feeling to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it ends up helping you sleep a little easier tonight. Let's talk about what's actually happening in your brain during one of these episodes, because it's not just worrying. Worrying is a mild, conscious activity. What happens at 2 a.m. when your finances are tight is something much more physiological. Your body is releasing cortisol, the same stress hormone your ancestors released when they heard a rustle in the bushes and had to decide in half a second whether that was the wind or something that wanted to eat them. Here's the problem. Your brain does not distinguish between "I might get eaten by a predator" and "I might not make rent." Both trigger the exact same alarm system. The difference is a predator resolves itself in about 30 seconds. You either run or you don't. A rent shortfall doesn't resolve in 30 seconds. It sits there, which means your body just keeps the alarm running, sometimes for hours, sometimes literally all night, because there's no action available at 2 a.m. that fixes the problem. You can't call your boss. You can't move money that isn't there. You can't do anything except lie there while your nervous system insists that something needs to be done right now. This is why financial anxiety hits hardest at night specifically. During the day, you have distractions. You have work, conversations, tasks, things that occupy the parts of your brain that would otherwise be spiraling. At night, when it's quiet and you're alone with your thoughts, there's nothing competing for your attention anymore. So the anxious thoughts, which have been sitting in the background all day, finally get the microphone. And they do not use it responsibly. Now here's where it gets interesting. And this is the part that surprised me when I first looked into the research. You'd think the fix for this would require a huge amount of money. Like, obviously, if you had $50,000 sitting in savings, you wouldn't be panicking about rent, right? Sure, but most people don't need anywhere close to that to interrupt this specific cycle. Researchers at Vanguard studied financial well-being across different savings levels, and they found something that should honestly be bigger news than it is. People with as little as $2,000 in emergency savings reported financial well-being scores that were 21% higher than people with zero savings. Not $20,000, not $10,000, $2,000. That was the single largest jump linked to any financial factor they measured in the entire study. Sound familiar? That specific feeling of your chest tightening when your phone buzzes with a bank notification, that reflexive flinch before you even open the banking app because some part of you is bracing for bad news, that's the exact reaction $2,000 in a separate account starts to dissolve. Not because $2,000 solves your financial problems. It doesn't. It won't pay off your debt. It won't buy you a house. It's genuinely not that much money in the grand scheme of things, but it does something your brain cares about way more than the actual dollar amount. It removes the immediate threat of total collapse. And your nervous system, the same one that's been treating every unexpected expense like a life or death emergency, finally gets to stand down. Here's why this works. Mechanically, your 2 a.m. brain isn't calculating your net worth. It's not thinking about your 5-year plan, or your retirement account, or your credit score. It's asking one incredibly primitive question on a loop. Can I survive the next unexpected thing that happens? When the honest answer is no, when a single flat tire, or a single missed shift, or a single medical copay would genuinely break you, your brain treats every day as a potential emergency, and it never fully relaxes, even when nothing is currently going wrong. When the answer becomes yes, even a shaky, uncomfortable, I could handle it, but it would hurt, kind of yes, the alarm system gets permission to quiet down. This is why people who build a small emergency fund often describe the change as immediate and almost physical. It's not that their income changed. It's not that their debt disappeared. It's that their brain stopped running a 24-hour threat assessment in the background of every single day. But I want to be honest with you about something most finance content skips over, because it matters here. Building $2,000 when you currently have $0 saved and you're already stretched thin every single month can feel like being told to climb Everest when you can barely walk up a flight of stairs. So let's break down what this actually looks like in practice, because the goal isn't to dump this number on you and walk away. The goal is to make it feel achievable enough that you actually start tonight instead of closing this video and forgetting about it by tomorrow afternoon. The mistake almost everyone makes here is trying to build the entire $2,000 buffer before they let themselves feel any relief. That's backwards, and it's actually one of the biggest reasons people give up on saving altogether. Your brain doesn't wait until you hit the full number to start calming down. It responds to progress. The shift from $0 to $100 in a separate account creates a noticeable, measurable change in how safe you feel, even though $100 obviously doesn't cover a real emergency. Why? Because zero means there is no barrier between you and total crisis. Even a small amount means there's now a barrier, however thin. Your nervous system cares about the existence of a buffer more than it cares about the exact size of it, at least at first. So here's the actual sequence that works. And this mirrors almost exactly what shows up in the research on financial well-being. First target, $100. Not because $100 fixes anything, but because it's the fastest way to prove to yourself that saving is even possible, and because it's the first psychological signal to your brain that things are shifting. Most people can find $100 within a week or two if they're honest about where their money is actually going. That subscription you forgot you had. The takeout order you almost got but didn't. Selling one thing you don't use anymore. It adds up faster than people expect once they're actually looking for it. Second target, $500. This is roughly where most minor emergencies stop being financial disasters. A car repair, a smaller medical bill, a broken appliance. $500 doesn't cover everything, but it covers the majority of what actually goes wrong in a normal month. And here's the part that matters psychologically. Once you hit $500, you've officially proven to yourself, twice now, that you're capable of building savings from nothing. That identity shift, the belief that you are someone who saves money instead of someone who can't, is doing just as much work as the dollar amount itself. Third target, the full $2,000. By the time you're working toward this number, you're not starting from the same emotional place you were at zero. You've already felt the relief of $100. You've already felt the bigger relief of $500. The final stretch to $2,000 tends to feel less like a grueling uphill climb and more like finishing something you're already deep into, because momentum in savings works exactly the same way it works with debt, pay down, or working out, or literally any habit that compounds. The first steps are the hardest. Every step after that gets a little easier because you're no longer fighting your own identity about what kind of person you are with money. Now let's talk about where this money should actually sit, because this trips people up more than you'd think. This emergency buffer should not be mixed in with your regular checking account. If it's sitting right next to your everyday spending money, you will dip into it. Not because you're irresponsible, but because your brain doesn't see a wall between money for emergencies and money that's just sitting there. Put it in a separate savings account, ideally one that's slightly annoying to access instantly, not locked away for years, just inconvenient enough that you have to make a deliberate choice to touch it instead of accidentally swiping a debit card connected to it. This single structural decision prevents the most common failure mode people run into, which is building the buffer and then slowly bleeding it away on non-emergencies without ever noticing it happening. Here's something else worth addressing directly, because I know exactly what some of you are thinking right now. This sounds nice, but I genuinely cannot find any extra money right now. I'm not going to pretend that's not a real situation for a lot of people, but here's what the research, and honestly, what I've seen repeatedly, is that the starting amount matters far less than people assume. Saving $5 a week gets you to $100 in 20 weeks. That's slow. I know it's slow, but 20 weeks from now is happening either way. The only choice you actually have is whether you're 20 weeks closer to a calmer 2 a.m. or 20 weeks exactly where you are right now, still doing that same math in the dark. Let's go back to that scene from the beginning of this video, because I want you to picture it differently now. Same person, same bed, same 2:14 a.m. Except this time, there's $2,000 sitting in an account they don't touch day to day. The car makes that same weird noise. But this time, instead of a spiral, there's a thought that shows up and actually finishes itself. I can get that looked at. I have room for that. That's it. That's the whole transformation. It's not dramatic. It's not a Ferrari. It's not a beach house. It's not financial freedom in the way social media likes to package it. It's just the quiet, almost boring experience of a problem existing without that problem threatening to take everything down with it. And here's the thing that I think gets lost in a lot of personal finance content. People treat this emergency buffer like it's a boring, optional first step before the real wealth building starts. Index funds, retirement accounts, investing, all of that matters, and we'll get into it in other videos. But none of it works well if you're still white-knuckling through every unexpected expense, because that's exactly when people cash out investments at the worst possible time. or rack up high-interest debt to cover something a $2,000 buffer would have absorbed without a second thought. This isn't the boring step before the real strategy. This is the foundation the entire rest of your financial life gets built on top of. Skip it, and everything else you build stays shaky. Handle it, and everything after this gets noticeably easier, both financially and in the very specific, very human sense of finally getting to sleep through the night. So if you're currently in the middle of one of these stretches, staring at a ceiling doing the same math I described at the start of this video, here's what I want you to actually do. Not tomorrow, not eventually, tonight, or tomorrow morning at the latest. Open a separate savings account if you don't already have one. Move whatever you can into it right now, even if it's $5. Not because $5 changes your financial situation, but because it changes the direction you're facing. You go from a person accumulating stress with no plan to a person who has already started building the exact buffer that research shows creates the biggest jump in financial well-being of any single number they measured. Your future self, the one who gets to fall back asleep in 20 minutes instead of 90, is going to thank you for starting tonight instead of waiting for some version of ready that never actually arrives.